David, what the hell is this? I whispered, sliding my phone across the birthday cake table so Emma could see the screenshots that had already been shared over 300 times on Instagram. The fairy lights strung around her backyard patio suddenly felt too bright, too cheerful for what was about to unfold. Our entire friend group was gathered around us, singing happy birthday just moments before, but now the music from the speaker seemed distant and hollow. Emma's face went white as she stared at the evidence glowing on my screen. Her husband's Connect Me profile, complete with shirtless gym photos and the bio that read, "Recently separated, looking for something real with someone who appreciates authenticity." The same photos I'd been swooning over for 3 weeks, not knowing I was falling for my best friend's husband. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 weeks earlier, I was drowning my sorrows in a pint of Ben & Jerry's while Sophie, my sister, watched me swipe through Connect Me profiles on my laptop. My downtown Austin loft felt smaller than usual, cluttered with the remnants of my recent breakup with Trevor, 2 years down the drain because he decided his personal growth journey required exploring other people. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now desperately swiping through dating apps, hoping to find someone genuine in a sea of gym selfies and pickup lines about tacos. "Maya, you need to get back out there," Sophie said, curling up on my gray sectional with her own laptop, working on some freelance design project that was keeping her busy until midnight. Trevor was an idiot anyway. "You're 28, you work at one of Austin's hottest startups, and you look amazing. Stop wallowing and start living." I appreciated her encouragement, but the dating scene in Austin felt overwhelming after being out of it for so long. Everyone seemed to be either a tech bro looking for their next conquest or a musician who thought their SoundCloud was going to make them the next big thing. I'd moved to Austin fresh out of UT 6 years ago, drawn by the city's energy and the promise of building something meaningful in the tech world. TechFlow Solutions had been my dream job, a digital marketing startup where creativity actually mattered, and where I'd worked my way up to managing major campaigns for local businesses. "Look at this guy," I said, pausing on a profile that actually caught my attention. The photos showed someone outdoorsy but not overly posed, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. His name was listed as Dave, 32 years old, working in real estate. His bio was refreshingly honest compared to the usual nonsense I'd been reading. "Recently separated, looking for something real with someone who appreciates authenticity. Love hiking, trying new restaurants, and having actual conversations. Not here for games or hookups." Sophie glanced over from her laptop. "He looks normal. That's already better than the last 5 guys you showed me." What drew me to Dave's profile wasn't just his appearance, though he was definitely attractive in that effortless Texas way. It was the thoughtfulness behind his photo. One showed him volunteering at what looked like a community garden. Another captured him mid-laugh at what appeared to be a friend's barbecue. There was something authentic about the way he presented himself, like he understood that real connection required vulnerability. I swiped right before I could overthink it. The match notification appeared instantly, followed by a message that made my heart skip. "Hey Maya, I love that photo of you at Zilker Park. That sunset was incredible last month. I'm guessing you're one of those people who actually appreciates Austin beyond the trendy spots." The fact that he'd noticed details in my photos and referenced a specific Austin location felt personal rather than generic. Most guys opened with "Hey beautiful" or some variation of a pickup line they'd probably copy-pasted to dozens of women. Dave seemed different. Our conversation flowed naturally from that first exchange. He asked thoughtful questions about my work at TechFlow, sharing his own passion for helping people find their dream homes in Austin's competitive market. He told me about growing up in San Antonio but falling in love with Austin's culture during college, the same journey I'd experienced. We discussed our favorite hiking trails, debated the best breakfast tacos in the city, and discovered a shared love of live music venues that weren't completely overrun by tourists. What impressed me most was his emotional intelligence. When I mentioned my recent breakup, he didn't immediately try to position himself as the better alternative. Instead, he shared his own experience with separation, acknowledging how difficult it was to start over, but expressing genuine optimism about finding the right person when the timing was right. I've learned that good relationships require both people to be whole individuals first, he wrote during one of our late-night conversations. I spent too long trying to fix something that was fundamentally broken, instead of recognizing when it was time to let go and grow. The wisdom in his words resonated deeply. Trevor had left me feeling like I wasn't enough, but Dave's perspective helped me see that some relationships end not because someone fails, but because people grow in different directions. It was exactly the kind of mature outlook I was hoping to find in a partner. Our texting evolved quickly from the app to regular phone calls. Dave had a warm, easy laugh that made even mundane topics feel engaging. He listened actively, asking follow-up questions that showed he remembered details from previous conversations. When I mentioned feeling stressed about a particularly demanding client at work, he checked in the next day to see how the presentation had gone. When he told me about challenges with a difficult real estate transaction, I found myself genuinely invested in the outcome. After 2 weeks of increasingly deep conversations, Dave suggested meeting in person at the Coffee Bean, a local spot in South Austin that wasn't trying too hard to be trendy. I know it sounds old-fashioned, he said during one of our phone calls, but I'd rather have our first conversation in person be somewhere we can actually talk without shouting over music or dealing with crowds. The consideration behind his choice reinforced everything I'd been learning about his character. He thought about creating the right environment for meaningful connection rather than just picking whatever was convenient or impressive. I spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing my outfit for our coffee date, finally settling on dark jeans and a casual sweater that felt authentically me, rather than trying too hard. Sophie helped me with my hair, creating effortless waves that looked natural but polished. "You're glowing," she observed as I checked my reflection one last time. "I haven't seen you this excited about anything since before Trevor. This guy must be something special." The nervous energy I felt was different from typical first date anxiety. Usually I approached dates with a mixture of hope and skepticism, prepared for disappointment, but hoping to be surprised. With Dave, I felt genuinely optimistic. Our phone conversations had established such a solid foundation that meeting in person felt like a natural next step rather than a high-pressure audition. I arrived at the Coffee Bean 5 minutes early, choosing a corner table that offered privacy while still feeling open and comfortable. The space was exactly what I'd hoped for, busy enough to feel lively but quiet enough for actual conversation. Local art covered the walls, and the smell of freshly roasted beans created a warm, welcoming atmosphere. Dave walked in exactly on time, and I felt my stomach flip with nervous excitement. He was even more attractive in person, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without trying. Tall and lean with dark hair and those same kind eyes I'd noticed in his photos. But there was something else, and confidence that made him seem older than 32. "Maya?" he asked, approaching my table with a smile that made me forget to be nervous. "That's me," I replied, standing to greet him with a hug that felt comfortable rather than awkward. "You look even more beautiful than your photos," he said, and somehow it didn't sound like a line. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I've been looking forward to this all week." We ordered our drinks and settled into conversation that picked up exactly where our phone calls had left off. Dave was an even better conversationalist in person, maintaining eye contact and responding thoughtfully to everything I shared. He asked about my background in marketing, my dreams for advancing at TechFlow, and my thoughts on Austin's rapid growth and how it was changing the character of the city. When I asked about his real estate work, his passion was immediately evident. He didn't just sell houses, he helped people find homes that matched their lifestyles and dreams. He told me about a young couple he'd recently helped find their first home, how emotional they'd gotten when they realized they could actually afford something in their preferred neighborhood. "There's something magical about matching people with the right space," he explained, leaning forward as he spoke. "It's not just about square footage or price points, it's about understanding how someone wants to live, and finding the place where they can build their best life." The way he talked about his work revealed someone who found meaning in helping others, who understood that major life decisions required both practical considerations and emotional intuition. It aligned perfectly with my own approach to marketing, where the best campaigns connected with people on a deeper level than just selling products. Our coffee date stretched into lunch as neither of us wanted the conversation to end. Dave suggested a small Mexican place nearby that he claimed had the best street tacos in Austin, a bold statement in a city that took its tacos seriously. "If these aren't amazing, I'm going to lose all credibility," he joked as we walked the 3 blocks to the restaurant. The casual family-owned spot was exactly the kind of hidden gem that made Austin special. The tacos were indeed incredible, and watching Dave interact with the staff in fluent Spanish revealed another layer of his character. He wasn't showing off. He was simply comfortable connecting with people in whatever language felt most natural. As we shared plates of food and continued talking, I found myself relaxing completely. Dave was funny without trying too hard, intelligent without being pretentious, and attentive without being overwhelming. He asked about my family, my college experience, my hopes for the future, and shared equally personal details about his own life. He told me about growing up as the youngest of 3 children in San Antonio, how his parents had worked multiple jobs to put all their kids through college. His respect and gratitude for their sacrifices was evident in how he spoke about them. He mentioned his older brother who was a teacher in Dallas and his sister who had moved to Denver for work, describing close family relationships that spoke well of his character. When I asked about his separation, he was honest without being bitter. "We got married young, and we both changed in different directions," he explained. "She wanted a more traditional life, staying close to family, maybe moving back to San Antonio. I was drawn to Austin's energy and opportunities. Neither of us was wrong, but we weren't right for each other anymore." The mature way he discussed his ended marriage impressed me. No blame, no drama, just acknowledgement that sometimes good people grow apart. It suggested someone capable of handling difficult emotions with grace and taking responsibility for his part in relationship dynamic. Our lunch extended into a walk around South Austin, exploring neighborhoods and discussing the city's evolution. Dave was incredibly knowledgeable about Austin's history and development, pointing out architectural details and sharing stories about different areas that revealed his deep connection to the city. "I love how Austin manages to feel both cosmopolitan and neighborly," I said as we paused at a food truck park where families and young professionals mingled comfortably. "That's exactly what drew me here," he agreed. "It's big enough to offer real opportunities, but small enough that you can still build genuine community. Though I worry about whether we can maintain that balance as the city keeps growing." His thoughtfulness about Austin's future showed someone who thought beyond immediate gratification, who cared about preserving what made places special while embracing positive change. It was the kind of perspective I'd hoped to find in a long-term partner. As our impromptu day together wound down, Dave walked me back to my car with obvious reluctance. I know this might sound forward. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. "Now back to the story," he said, "but I'd love to see you again soon, maybe this weekend. There's a new hiking trail I've been wanting to explore and you mentioned loving outdoor adventure." The invitation was perfect, suggesting activity we'd both enjoy while creating opportunity for continued conversation. "I'd love that," I replied honestly. "Saturday works perfectly." He leaned in for a goodbye hug that lasted just long enough to feel meaningful without being presumptuous. "I'll call you tomorrow to work out details," he promised. "Thank you for such an incredible day, Maya. You're even more amazing than I imagined." Driving home, I felt the kind of optimistic excitement I hadn't experienced in years. Not just attraction or infatuation, but genuine excitement about getting to know someone who seemed to share my values and outlook on life. Dave felt like someone I could build something real with, someone who understood that lasting relationships required both chemistry and compatibility. That evening, Sophie immediately noticed my mood when I walked into my apartment. "Okay, spill everything," she demanded, abandoning her laptop and curling up on the couch expectantly. "You look like someone who just had the best first date of her life." I told her everything, from our effortless conversation, to his thoughtfulness about choosing the right venue, to his mature perspective on his previous relationship. Sophie listened with growing excitement, occasionally interrupting with questions or commentary. "He sounds too good to be true," she said finally, but not in a skeptical way, like actually too good to be true. When was the last time you met a guy who was emotionally intelligent, financially stable, physically attractive, and genuinely interested in building something meaningful? Never, I admitted. That's what's making me nervous. What if I'm reading too much into things? What if he's just really good at first impressions? Sophie shook her head firmly. Maya, stop catastrophizing. Sometimes good things happen to good people. You deserve someone who appreciates you and treats you well. Maybe Dave is exactly what he appears to be. Her encouragement felt both reassuring and terrifying. After Trevor's betrayal, I'd built emotional walls designed to protect myself from disappointment. Dave's apparent authenticity was forcing me to consider lowering those defenses, which felt both exciting and vulnerable. Over the following days, Dave's consistent communication reinforced my positive impression. He called when he said he would, texted thoughtful messages without overwhelming me, and made plans with consideration for both our schedules. When I mentioned being stressed about a deadline at work, he offered encouragement without trying to solve my problems for me. When he had to postpone our Saturday hike due to a last-minute work emergency, he immediately suggested alternative times and apologized sincerely for the inconvenience. Everything about Dave's behavior suggested someone genuine, someone worth investing emotional energy in getting to know better. I found myself looking forward to his messages, checking my phone more frequently than usual, and actually excited about dating for the first time in months. The postponed hiking date was rescheduled for the following weekend, and Dave suggested meeting at Barton Creek Greenbelt for a trail that would challenge us without being overwhelming. I want to make sure we can still have conversations while we're hiking, he explained. The best outdoor adventures include good company. I was falling for him, not just attracted or intrigued, but genuinely developing feelings for someone I'd known for less than 3 weeks. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying, forcing me to confront how much I wanted this connection to develop into something lasting and meaningful. What I didn't know was that Dave's authenticity was a carefully constructed illusion, that his emotional intelligence was actually manipulation refined through practice, and that his understanding of relationships came from maintaining multiple deceptions simultaneously. I didn't know that while we were building what felt like genuine connection, he was living a double life that would soon destroy not just my trust in him, but my trust in my own judgment and my closest friendship. The man I was falling for didn't actually exist. The hiking date exceeded every expectation I'd built up during our phone conversations. Dave picked me up Saturday morning in a spotless black pickup truck, arriving exactly when he'd promised with coffee from my favorite local roaster and trail mix he'd made himself. The thoughtfulness of bringing my preferred coffee order, which I'd mentioned casually during one of our conversations, demonstrated the kind of attention to detail that made me feel genuinely valued. I hope you don't mind that I remembered your usual order, he said, handing me the perfectly prepared iced oat milk latte. I figured caffeine might help with the early start. The gesture was sweet without being overwhelming, practical without losing its romantic undertone. As we drove toward Barton Creek Greenbelt, Dave maintained easy conversation while navigating Austin's Saturday morning traffic with the kind of patience that spoke well of his character. He asked about my week at TechFlow, listened attentively to my description of a challenging campaign launch, and shared his own work stories with humor and insight. The trail he'd chosen was absolutely perfect for a getting-to-know-you adventure, challenging enough to feel like an accomplishment, but accessible enough that we could maintain conversation throughout the hike. The November weather was ideal for outdoor activities, crisp and clear with the kind of sunshine that made Austin's natural beauty shine. Dave was an excellent hiking companion, setting a comfortable pace and pointing out interesting flora and geological features, without being pedantic. His knowledge of the area was impressive, gained through years of exploring Austin's outdoor spaces rather than cramming for our day. When we reached a scenic overlook about halfway through the trail, he suggested we rest and enjoy the view. "This is why I love Austin," he said, settling beside me on a large limestone boulder. "You can be in the middle of the city and still find places that feel completely wild and untouched." The view was spectacular, offering panoramic vistas of the Greenbelt's rolling hills and the Austin skyline in the distance. More importantly, The setting created an intimate atmosphere for deeper conversation. Dave asked thoughtful questions about my childhood in Dallas, my decision to study marketing, and my dreams for advancing in Austin's competitive tech industry. When I shared my long-term goal of eventually starting my own marketing consultancies, focused on helping local businesses compete with larger corporations, Dave's enthusiasm was genuine and encouraging. He didn't just offer generic support, he asked specific questions about my business plan and shared insights from his real estate experience, about building client relationships and establishing credibility in competitive markets. Austin's growth creates incredible opportunities for people who understand both the traditional community values and the new economy demands, he observed. Someone with your skills and local knowledge could really make a difference for businesses trying to maintain their identity while scaling up. His encouragement felt substantive rather than superficial, based on actual understanding of my goals rather than simple romantic interest. The conversation revealed someone capable of seeing me as a whole person with professional ambitions and personal dreams, not just a potential girlfriend. As we continued hiking, Dave shared more details about his own background and aspirations. His real estate work focused primarily on helping young professionals and growing families find homes in Austin's rapidly changing market. He took pride in educating first-time buyers about neighborhoods they might not have considered, matching people with areas that fit their lifestyle and budget rather than just pushing expensive property. Too many agents in this market are focused on quick sales and high commissions, he explained as we navigated a particularly rocky section of trail. I'd rather build long-term relationships with clients who trust me to help them make one of the biggest decisions of their life. The integrity behind his approach to work aligned perfectly with my own professional values. In marketing, the pressure to overpromise and manipulate consumers was constant, but I'd always believed that authentic connections produced better results than clever manipulation. Finding someone who shared that philosophy felt rare and valuable. Our conversation during the hike covered everything from family relationships to travel dreams to our thoughts on Austin's cultural evolution. Dave was well-read and thoughtful, able to discuss current events and social issues with nuance rather than defaulting to polarized talking points. When we disagreed about minor topics, he listened respectfully and acknowledged valid points in my perspective rather than becoming defensive or dismissive. The physical attraction was undeniable, but what impressed me most was the mental and emotional compatibility we seemed to share. Dave was intelligent without being condescending, confident without being arrogant, and emotionally available without being overwhelming. He asked about my past relationships with genuine curiosity rather than jealousy, and shared his own romantic history with honesty and appropriate vulnerability. After completing the trail, Dave suggested lunch at a food truck park near Zilker where we could continue our conversation in a relaxed setting. The choice was perfect, offering variety and casual atmosphere while still feeling like a proper day. We shared several different dishes, feeding each other bites and laughing over the inevitable messiness of eating tacos outdoors. I have a confession, Dave said as we finished our meal. I've been thinking about kissing you since about 10 minutes into our coffee date last week. The admission was perfectly timed, honest without being presumptuous, and delivered with just enough nervousness to feel genuine rather than practiced. When I smiled in response, he leaned closer, giving me opportunity to close the distance or create space depending on my comfort level. Our first kiss was everything I'd hoped for, and more, soft and tentative initially, then deeper as we both relaxed into the moment. Dave was an excellent kisser, confident but responsive, passionate but respectful. The physical chemistry I'd felt building during our conversations translated perfectly into physical intimacy. That was worth waiting for, he murmured against my lips, and I couldn't have agreed more. The rest of our afternoon unfolded with the kind of natural ease that usually took months to develop with someone new. We walked around Zilker Park, people watched from a shady spot under the live oaks, and continued talking about everything and nothing. Dave was funny in subtle ways, making observations about passers-by that were clever without being mean-spirited. When evening approached, neither of us wanted the date to end. Dave suggested dinner at a small Italian place in South Austin that he claimed had the best carbonara outside of Italy, another bold culinary promise that I was excited to test. The restaurant was intimate and dimly lit, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic and fresh herbs filling the air. Dave had clearly been there before, greeting the host by name and being led to a corner table that offered privacy while still feeling part of the lively atmosphere. "You're going to think I'm showing off," he said after we'd ordered wine, "but I spent a semester in Rome during college, and this place actually comes close to what I remember." The carbonara was indeed exceptional, and watching Dave's genuine pleasure in sharing something he loved revealed another appealing dimension of his character. He wasn't trying to impress me with expensive tastes or exclusive knowledge. He simply wanted to share experiences that brought him joy. Over dinner, our conversation became more personal and intimate. Dave talked about his family with obvious affection, describing parents who had immigrated from Mexico when he was young and worked incredibly hard to provide opportunities for their children. His respect for their sacrifices was evident in every story he shared, and his commitment to making the most of the opportunities they'd created for him spoke well of his character. When I asked about his marriage and separation, he was refreshingly honest without being inappropriate. "We met in college and got married too young," he explained. "She's a wonderful person, but we wanted different things from life. I was ready to take risks and build something new, while she preferred security and tradition. Neither approach is wrong, but they weren't compatible long-term." The mature way he discussed his ended marriage continued to impress me. No bitterness, no blame, just acknowledgement that sometimes good people grow in different directions. His ability to maintain respect for his ex-wife, while being honest about their incompatibilities, suggested someone capable of handling conflict with grace and taking responsibility for his part in relationship dynamic. As dinner wound down, Dave walked me to my car with obvious reluctance to see the evening end. "I know this might sound crazy after just 2 dates," he said, "but I feel like I've been waiting to meet you for years. Everything about spending time with you feels right." His honesty was both thrilling and terrifying. I felt exactly the same way, but admitting it felt vulnerable after being hurt so recently by Trevor. "It doesn't sound crazy," I replied softly. "I feel it too." Our goodnight kiss was longer and more passionate than our afternoon kiss, filled with promise and growing attraction. Dave held me close, one hand tangled in my hair, the other resting on the small of my back. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. "I'll call you tomorrow," he promised, and I knew he would. Driving home, I felt the kind of giddy excitement usually reserved for teenagers with first crush. Dave was everything I'd been hoping to find in a partner: attractive, intelligent, emotionally mature, and genuinely interested in building something meaningful. The physical chemistry was undeniable, but more importantly, the emotional and intellectual compatibility felt rare and valuable. Sophie was waiting up when I got home, despite it being nearly midnight. "You look like someone who just had the perfect second date," she observed with a knowing smile. "Tell me everything." I recounted the entire day, from the thoughtful coffee delivery to our passionate goodnight kiss. Sophie listened with growing excitement, occasionally interrupting with questions or commentary about Dave's various thoughtful gestures. "Maya, this guy sounds incredible," she said, when I finished my detailed recap. "Like almost too good to be true incredible. Are you sure he's not hiding something terrible?" Her question was joking, but it touched on my own lingering anxieties. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," I admitted. "He seems perfect, which makes me nervous." "People aren't usually perfect." Sophie shook her head firmly. "People aren't perfect, but they can be perfect for each other. Maybe Dave is exactly what he appears to be, and maybe you deserve something wonderful after putting up with Trevor's nonsense for 2 years." Her encouragement felt both reassuring and challenging. I wanted to believe that Dave was genuine, that our connection was as real as it felt, but protecting myself from potential disappointment had become second nature after recent heartbreak. Over the following week, Dave's consistent communication and thoughtful gestures continued to reinforce my positive impression. He texted good morning messages that were sweet without being clingy, called when he said he would, and made plans that demonstrated genuine interest in getting to know me better. When I mentioned being stressed about a difficult client presentation, he sent flowers to my office with a note that read, "You've got this. Austin's luckiest client just doesn't know it yet." The gesture was perfectly calibrated, supportive without being overwhelming, romantic without being presumptuous. My coworkers at TechFlow were impressed, particularly Jake Thompson, who'd become a good friend since joining the company 6 months earlier. "Okay, I'm officially jealous," Jake said, examining the beautiful bouquet Dave had sent. "This guy has serious game. Where did you find him?" "Connect me," I replied, feeling slightly embarrassed about meeting someone through a dating app, despite knowing it was completely normal in Austin's young professional scene. "Well, he's definitely doing it right," Jake observed. "Most guys send flowers after they screw up, not just to be supportive. This is some next-level relationship behavior." The validation from Jake, whose opinion I'd grown to respect, felt meaningful. As someone who'd observed Austin's dating scene from a male perspective, his assessment carried weight. If Jake was impressed by Dave's approach, it suggested that Dave's behavior was genuinely exceptional, rather than just appearing special in contrast to Trevor's emotional unavailability. Our third date was dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. Dave's suggestion after I mentioned wanting to try the new farm-to-table place that had been getting rave reviews. He made reservations for a Friday night, arriving at my apartment to pick me up rather than meeting at the restaurant. "You look absolutely stunning," he said when I opened the door, and his admiration felt genuine rather than obligatory. I'd chosen a black dress that was sophisticated without being too formal, paired with heels that made me feel confident and attractive. The restaurant exceeded all expectations, with creative dishes that showcased local ingredients and flavors. Dave had clearly researched the menu in advance, able to make informed recommendations while being open to sharing whatever caught my interest. His knowledge of food and wine was impressive without being pretentious, gained through genuine curiosity rather than desire to show off. Over dinner, our conversation became even more intimate and personal. Dave shared details about his childhood, his relationship with his siblings, and his hopes for the future that revealed depth and emotional intelligence. He asked thoughtful questions about my own background, my relationship with Sophie, and my dreams beyond immediate career goals. "I want to travel more," I told him when he asked about my bucket list items. "I've been so focused on building my career that I haven't made time for adventures. I'd love to see Europe, maybe take a cooking class in Italy, or learn photography in Iceland." "I love that," Dave replied enthusiastically. "I've been wanting to plan a real vacation for years, but traveling alone never felt as appealing as sharing new experiences with someone special." The implication that he could imagine traveling with me sent butterflies through my stomach. After just 3 dates, discussing future adventures felt both premature and perfectly natural given the intensity of our connection. As dinner progressed, Dave surprised me by revealing that he'd been thinking about our compatibility beyond just immediate attraction. "I know this might sound intense," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand, "but I've been imagining what it would be like to build a life with someone who shares my values and dreams. Meeting you has made those visions feel possible for the first time." His honesty was breathtaking in its vulnerability. Most people, especially in Austin's casual dating culture, avoided discussing serious intentions until months into a relationship. Dave's willingness to be emotionally transparent felt both refreshing and slightly overwhelming. "I feel the same way," I admitted, squeezing his hand. "I wasn't looking for anything serious when I joined Connect Me, but everything about being with you feels right." After dinner, Dave suggested a walk along Ladybird Lake to continue our conversation away from the restaurant's crowd. The downtown skyline reflected beautifully in the water, and the November evening was perfect for strolling hand in hand along the boardwalk. "Maya, I need to tell you something," Dave said as we paused near the pedestrian bridge. His serious tone made my heart race with anxiety, wondering if this was the moment when he revealed whatever flaw I'd been unconsciously waiting to discover. "I know we've only known each other for a few weeks," he continued, "but I'm already falling for you hard. I don't want to scare you away by moving too fast, but I also don't want to pretend my feelings are casual when they're not." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by overwhelming emotion. "You're not scaring me," I whispered. "I'm falling for you too." Our kiss against the backdrop of Austin's glittering skyline felt like something from a romantic movie, passionate and tender and full of promise. Dave held me like I was precious, murmuring sweet words against my lips between kisses. "Stay with me tonight," he said softly. I want to wake up next to you. The invitation felt natural despite our relatively short acquaintance. Everything about our relationship had progressed with unusual intensity, driven by connection that felt both rare and valuable. Yes, I replied without hesitation. Dave's apartment was a pleasant surprise, decorated with actual furniture, rather than the typical bachelor pad aesthetic of folding chairs and sports memorabilia. The space was clean and thoughtfully arranged, with artwork on the walls and books on the shelves that suggested someone who cared about creating a home rather than just having a place to sleep. This is beautiful, I said, admiring his living room with its comfortable sectional and carefully chosen decor. You have excellent taste. I believe your living space should reflect who you are, Dave replied, opening a bottle of wine while I explored his bookshelf. Life's too short to live surrounded by things that don't bring you joy. His book collection was impressive and eclectic, ranging from literary fiction to biographies, to books about real estate and business development. The variety suggested someone with broad interests and genuine intellectual curiosity. We settled on his couch with wine, continuing to talk as physical attraction built between us. Dave was patient and attentive, letting me set the pace while making his own interest abundantly clear. When we finally moved to his bedroom, everything felt natural and right. Dave was a generous and skilled lover, focused on my pleasure rather than just his own. The physical intimacy felt like a natural extension of the emotional connection we'd been building, passionate but tender, exciting but comfortable. Afterward, we lay tangled together talking softly until we drifted off to sleep. Waking up next to Dave felt like the most natural thing in the world. He was already awake when I opened my eyes, watching me with a soft smile that made my heart skip. "Good morning, beautiful," he murmured, pulling me closer for a lazy morning kiss. We spent the morning in bed, talking and laughing and making love again with even more passion than the night before. Dave made coffee and brought it back to bed, along with pastries from a bakery downstairs that I hadn't realized existed. "I may never leave this apartment," I said, curled against his chest with perfect coffee and a chocolate croissant. "I wouldn't complain," Dave replied, running his fingers through my hair. "This is exactly how I want to spend every weekend morning for the foreseeable future." By the time I reluctantly returned to my own apartment that afternoon, I was completely smitten. Dave felt like everything I'd been looking for in a partner without even knowing I was looking for it. The combination of physical chemistry, emotional compatibility, and shared values felt almost too good to be true. Sophie immediately noticed my glow when I walked through the door. "You slept with him," she announced without preamble, and based on that smile it was amazing. I couldn't deny either observation. "Sophie, I think I'm falling in love with him," I admitted, collapsing onto our couch with a dreamy sigh. "After 3 days?" she asked, though her tone was more impressed than concerned. "I know it sounds crazy, but everything about being with him feels right. The conversation, the chemistry, the way he treats me like I'm the most important person in the world. I've never experienced anything like this." Sophie studied my face carefully before breaking into a wide grin. "You know what? Good for you. Life's too short to play games when you find something special. If Dave makes you this happy, embrace." Her enthusiasm gave me permission to fully acknowledge the depth of my feelings, without overthinking the timeline. Some connections developed slowly over time, but others hit with immediate intensity. What Dave and I shared felt significant enough to warrant taking emotional risks. Over the following days, our relationship deepened with remarkable speed. Dave introduced me to his favorite restaurants and hidden spots around Austin, while I showed him places that had become meaningful to me during my 6 years in the city. We discovered shared interests in live music, local art, and outdoor adventures that provided endless options for dates and shared experiences. More importantly, we began integrating into each other's daily lives in small but meaningful ways. Dave would bring coffee to my office when he had appointments nearby, and I would stop by his real estate office with lunch when my schedule allowed. We texted throughout the day, sharing funny observations or sweet messages that kept us connected even when we were busy with work. The natural progression of our relationship felt both exciting and slightly overwhelming. After years of casual dating and a long relationship with Trevor that had never felt this effortless, experiencing genuine compatibility was revelatory. Dave anticipated my needs, remembered details from our conversations, and consistently made choices that prioritized our relationship without neglecting his own responsibility. When Dave suggested meeting some of his friends at a group dinner the following weekend, I felt ready to take that step despite our relatively short relationship. Meeting someone's social circle represented a new level of commitment, an acknowledgement that what we shared was significant enough to integrate with existing friendships. "Are you sure you're ready for the Inquisition?" Dave asked, with a playful smile. "My friends are protective, and they're going to want to make sure you're good enough for me. I think I can handle some friendly interrogation," I replied confidently. "Besides, I'm curious to meet the people who matter to you." What I didn't know was that Dave's friends included couples from our shared social circle, people who knew me as Emma's best friend, and would immediately recognize the impossibility of what was happening. I didn't know that Dave's careful construction of our relationship was about to collide with reality, in ways that would destroy not just my trust in him, but fundamental assumptions about the people closest to me. I was still living in the beautiful illusion that Dave was exactly who he claimed to be, that our connection was as genuine as it felt, and that I was finally building something real with someone worthy of my love and trust. The truth was much more devastating than I could have imagined. The group dinner Dave had suggested was planned for Saturday night, at Suerte, one of Austin's hottest restaurants that required reservations weeks in advance. The fact that Dave had managed to secure a table for 8 people on short notice impressed me, though I assumed it was through his real estate connections or simply good planning on his part. "I'm excited for you to meet everyone," Dave said, as we drove downtown Saturday evening. "Tom and I have been business partners for 3 years, and his girlfriend Sarah is amazing. Plus there's this couple, Marcus and Ashley, who are some of our closest friends. They're all going to love you." The casual way he mentioned these names meant nothing to me at the time. I had no reason to connect Tom Anderson with anyone I knew, or to realize that Marcus Johnson was a name I'd heard before in different contexts. In Austin's interconnected social scene, overlapping friend groups were common, but I wasn't paying attention to the potential for uncomfortable coincidences. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, wanting to make a good impression on Dave's friends, while staying true to my own style. The navy dress I selected was sophisticated but not overly formal, paired with wedges that would be comfortable for a long dinner and jewelry that Sophie had helped me choose. Dave's appreciative glance when he picked me up confirmed that I'd struck the right balance. "You look incredible," he said, kissing me softly before we left my apartment. "I can't wait to show you off." His pride in being with me felt genuine and warm, adding to my confidence about meeting his social circle. The way Dave talked about his friends suggested a close-knit group that valued loyalty and authenticity, qualities I hoped to demonstrate during our evening together. Suerte's atmosphere was perfect for group dining, with warm lighting and an energy level that encouraged conversation without being overwhelming. Dave had requested a large corner table that would allow everyone to interact comfortably, another thoughtful detail that demonstrated his consideration for group dynamics. We arrived first, giving me a chance to settle in and review the menu before the social pressure of meeting new people began. Dave ordered a bottle of wine he knew I'd enjoy and explained the restaurant's concept, showcasing Austin's Mexican heritage through modern culinary techniques. "Tom should be here any minute," Dave said, checking his watch. "He's always exactly on time, while Sarah tends to run about 10 minutes late. Marcus and Ashley are wild cards, could show up early or 15 minutes after everyone else depending on Ashley's work schedule." The detailed knowledge of his friends' habits spoke to genuine closeness and years of shared experiences. I was looking forward to learning more about Dave through the perspectives of people who'd known him longer than our few weeks together. Tom Anderson arrived precisely when Dave had predicted, accompanied by a petite blonde woman who must have been Sarah. Tom was tall and confident with the kind of polished appearance that suggested success in business, while Sarah had an artistic vibe that immediately put me at ease. "Dave, you didn't mention how beautiful Maya is," Sarah said warmly after introductions were made. "I love your dress and your hair is gorgeous." The genuine compliments helped me relax as we settled into conversation about Austin's restaurant scene, and our various work projects. Tom's partnership with Dave in luxury real estate was clearly successful, judging by his expensive watch and casual references to high-end clients. Sarah worked as a freelance photographer, specializing in lifestyle shoots for local businesses. Maya works at TechFlow Solutions, Dave explained proudly. She's basically revolutionizing digital marketing for Austin's small business community. His enthusiastic description of my work felt wonderfully supportive, demonstrating that he'd been listening carefully to my professional ambitions and understood their significance. Tom and Sarah asked intelligent questions about the marketing industry and shared their own experiences working with local businesses. 20 minutes later, another couple approached our table, and my stomach dropped as I recognized them both. Marcus Johnson was Emma's older brother, the lawyer she talked about constantly, and who'd been present at numerous social gatherings over the years. Ashley Wong was someone I knew peripherally from our college friend group, though we'd never been particularly close. The recognition was instant and mutual. Ashley's face registered surprise and confusion as she processed seeing me at what was clearly a double date with people she knew through different social circles. Marcus looked equally puzzled, his lawyer's mind probably already working through the implications of this unexpected overlap. "Maya," Ashley said uncertainly, "what are you doing here?" The question was innocent enough, but it immediately created an uncomfortable tension at the table. Dave looked between us with growing confusion, clearly sensing undercurrents he didn't understand. "You two know each other?" he asked, reaching for my hand in a gesture of support. "We went to college together," I explained carefully, trying to navigate the sudden complexity of the situation. "Ashley, this is Dave." "Dave." Ashley and I were in some of the same classes at UT. What I couldn't say, what would have immediately exploded the entire evening, was that Marcus was Emma Rodriguez's brother, which meant he knew Emma was married to David Rodriguez. The David Rodriguez who was sitting next to me calling himself Dave, and holding my hand like a devoted boyfriend. Marcus was staring at Dave with an expression I couldn't quite read. There was recognition there, but also something else, confusion perhaps, or concern. As Emma's brother, Marcus would have been at her wedding, would have spent holidays and family gatherings with David. There was no way he couldn't recognize his brother-in-law sitting across from him. "Dave," Marcus said slowly, his voice carrying an odd undertone. "You look familiar. Have we met before?" The question hung in the air with uncomfortable weight. Dave's grip on my hand tightened slightly, but his expression remained pleasantly puzzled. "I don't think so," Dave replied smoothly, "though Austin's a small town in some way. Maybe we've crossed paths at networking events or something." His response was casual and believable, but something in Marcus's eyes suggested he wasn't buying the explanation. Ashley meanwhile was looking between Dave and me with growing confusion. "Maya, I thought you were dating that guy Trevor," Ashley said, clearly trying to piece together the timeline of my relationship status. "We broke up a few months ago," I explained, grateful for a straightforward question I could answer honestly. "Dave and I met on Connect Me about 3 weeks ago." The mention of the dating app seemed to surprise Marcus even further. His expression shifted from confusion to something approaching alarm, though he was clearly trying to maintain polite dinner conversation despite whatever internal crisis he was experiencing. Tom and Sarah, oblivious to the undercurrents between the rest of us, launched into conversation about Austin's dating scene and their own relationship origin story. Their cheerful chatter provided cover for the tension that had suddenly developed, though I could feel Marcus continuing to study Dave with uncomfortable intensity. As dinner progressed, I found myself increasingly on edge, despite Dave's continued attentiveness and affection. He seemed completely unaware of Marcus's scrutiny, engaging in normal conversation about business and local events. But Marcus's behavior was becoming more strange as the evening continued, asking pointed questions about Dave's background and work that felt more like interrogation than friendly getting-to-know-you conversation. Marcus asked during a lull in conversation, "About 5 years now," Dave replied easily. "Started right after college, worked my way up through a few different firms before partnering with Tom." "And you're originally from San Antonio?" Marcus pressed. "That's right. My family's still there, though I visit Austin so often for work that I decided to relocate permanently." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, but his expression remained troubled. I could see him processing information, comparing Dave's answers against knowledge he possessed from some other source. Ashley, meanwhile, had been unusually quiet after our initial exchange. She kept glancing at her phone and seemed distracted from the dinner conversation. When she excused herself to use the restroom, I noticed her taking her phone with her, which struck me as odd, given that she'd barely touched it during the first part of the evening. "Everything okay with Ashley?" I asked Marcus during her absence. "She's fine," he replied, but his tone was strange. "Just remembered something she needed to handle." When Ashley returned from the restroom, she looked even more unsettled than before. She whispered something to Marcus that I couldn't hear, causing his face to darken with what looked like anger or concern. "Actually, we should probably head out," Marcus announced abruptly. "Ashley's not feeling well." The excuse was clearly fabricated, but Tom and Sarah accepted it with polite concern. Dave expressed appropriate sympathy and suggested we all get together again soon when Ashley was feeling better. As Marcus and Ashley prepared to leave, Marcus lingered beside our table with an expression of internal conflict. He seemed to be debating whether to say something, his eyes moving between Dave and me with obvious distress. "Maya," he said finally, "could I talk to you privately for just a minute?" The request sent alarm bells through my mind, but I couldn't think of a polite way to refuse. "Of course," I replied, following him a few steps away from our table. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly," Marcus said in a low voice, glancing back toward Dave. "How much do you know about this guy's background?" "What do you mean?" I asked, though my heart was already racing with anxiety about what he might reveal. "His name, his family situation, his relationship history. What has he told you?" The questions were making me increasingly uncomfortable. "Marcus, why are you asking? Do you know something I should know?" He hesitated, clearly struggling with some internal ethical dilemma. "I can't say anything specific right now," he said finally, "but I think you should be very careful about trusting everything he's told you. Some things might not be what they seem." The cryptic warning sent chills through me, but before I could press for more information, Marcus was walking away with Ashley, leaving me standing alone with a growing sense of dread. When I returned to the table, Dave immediately noticed my distress. "What was that about?" he asked with apparent concern. "You look upset." "Marcus just wanted to catch up about some college stuff," I lied, not wanting to create drama without understanding what Marcus had been trying to tell me. "Nothing important." But internally, my mind was racing with questions and fears. Marcus's behavior throughout dinner suddenly made more sense. If he knew something damaging about Dave's background, the way he'd studied Dave's face, the pointed questions about his history, the urgent private conversation with Ashley, all of it suggested knowledge that contradicted whatever story Dave had been telling me. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Tom and Sarah continued their cheerful conversation, while Dave maintained his usual charm and attentiveness, but I found myself studying his expressions and mannerisms with new suspicion, wondering what Marcus might have recognized that I was missing. During the drive back to my apartment, Dave seemed to sense my changed mood, despite my attempts to act normal. "You've been quiet since Marcus pulled you aside," he observed. "Are you sure everything's okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, though the lie felt transparent. "Just tired from a long week." Dave accepted my explanation without pushing, but I could feel him watching me with concern as we walked to my door. When he leaned in for our usual goodnight kiss, I found myself responding automatically, while my mind churned with Marcus's warning. "I'll call you tomorrow," Dave said softly. "Sleep well, beautiful." After he left, I sat on my couch staring at my phone, debating whether to call Marcus and demand a full explanation of his cryptic warning. The rational part of my mind argued that I was overreacting to what might have been simple social awkwardness or mistaken identity, but my intuition was screaming that something was seriously wrong. Sophie found me there an hour later, still dressed in my dinner outfit, and staring blankly at the wall. "How was meeting Dave's friends?" she asked, settling beside me on the couch. "Complicated," I replied, then told her everything about Marcus's strange behavior and warning. Sophie listened with growing concern, asking clarifying questions about exactly what Marcus had said and how he'd acted throughout the evening. "Maya, this is serious," she said when I finished my account. "Emma's brother doesn't know you well enough to play games or create drama for no reason. If he's warning you about Dave, there's probably a real reason. The validation of my instincts was both reassuring and terrifying. But what could it be? I asked. Dave's been nothing but wonderful. Everything about him seems genuine. That's what makes good liars so dangerous, Sophie pointed out grimly. They're convincing because they've practiced being convincing. Her words sent ice through my veins, because they resonated with fears I'd been suppressing since the beginning of my relationship with Dave. He was almost too good to be true, too perfectly suited to my needs and desires, too skilled at saying and doing exactly the right thing. What should I do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the possibility that my perfect relationship might be built on lies. You need to find out what Marcus knows, Sophie said firmly, and you need to do your own research about Dave's background. If there's nothing to hide, then investigating won't hurt anything, but if there are secrets, you need to know before you get in any deeper. Her advice was logical, but the thought of actively investigating the man I was falling in love with felt like a betrayal of trust. Yet Marcus's warning echoed in my mind, suggesting that trust might already have been betrayed in ways I didn't yet understand. That night, I lay awake replaying every conversation I'd had with Dave, searching for inconsistencies or warning signs I might have missed. His stories about his background, his work, his previous relationship, all of it seemed consistent and believable, but Marcus's recognition and alarm suggested that something fundamental about Dave's identity was false. The next morning, I made a decision that felt both necessary and terrible. I was going to investigate Dave Rodriguez, starting with basic background research, and escalating as needed, until I understood what Marcus had been trying to warn me about. I started with social media, searching for Dave Rodriguez on various platforms, using the information he'd given me about his background and work. What I found was surprisingly sparse for someone our age: a basic Facebook profile with limited photos and minimal personal information, a LinkedIn page that confirmed his real estate work, but provided few details about his personal life or relationship history. The lack of digital footprint felt odd in an era when most people left extensive online trails through photos, posts, and social interaction. Dave's online presence felt sanitized, almost deliberately minimal. My next step was searching for public records related to his real estate license and business partnership. Texas real estate licensing information was publicly available, and I was able to confirm that David Rodriguez was indeed a licensed agent working with Tom Anderson's firm. But even this official information felt incomplete, lacking the kind of detail that would help me understand his full background. As I dug deeper into online searches, I found myself entering search terms that felt increasingly invasive and paranoid. David Rodriguez, marriage record. David Rodriguez, divorce proceedings. David Rodriguez, Austin, Texas wife. It was the last search that changed everything. The results that appeared on my laptop screen made my blood run cold. Multiple social media profiles, wedding announcements, and local news features showing David Rodriguez, not as the recently separated man I'd been dating, but as someone actively married to Emma Rodriguez, my best friend of 8 years. The photos were unmistakable. David and Emma at charity events, David and Emma on vacation, David and Emma celebrating their anniversary just 6 months ago. The same man who'd been telling me about his separation and his readiness for new love was clearly living as a married man with no indication of any marital problem. I stared at the evidence on my screen, my hands shaking as I scrolled through photo after photo of Dave with Emma, wedding pictures from 4 years ago, recent social media posts showing them at dinner last week, professional headshots where Emma identified herself as Mrs. Emma Rodriguez. The timeline was devastating. Every date I'd shared with Dave had occurred while he was actively married to Emma. Every intimate conversation, every declaration of growing feelings, every night we'd spent together had been built on lies, while he went home to my best friend. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I felt physically sick. This wasn't a case of someone being dishonest about minor details or exaggerating their success. This was systematic deception involving my closest friendship and most trusted relationship. But even more disturbing than Dave's lies was the implication for my friendship with Emma. How was it possible that she didn't know her husband was actively dating other women? Was she complicit in his deception, or was she being betrayed just as thoroughly as I was? I thought about all my recent conversations with Emma, searching for signs that she knew about David's infidelity. She'd seemed normal, happy even, talking about work and life and our upcoming plans for her birthday party. Either she was an excellent actress, or she was as unaware of her husband's double life as I had been. The birthday party. Emma's 30th birthday celebration was planned for the following weekend, an event I'd been looking forward to for months. Now the thought of facing Emma while knowing what I knew about David felt impossible. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave himself, perfectly timed to add insult to injury. "Good morning, beautiful. Thinking about you and hoping your Sunday is as amazing as you are. Can't wait to see you again soon." The message that would have warmed my heart just hours earlier now felt like mockery. Dave was probably lying in bed with Emma while texting romantic messages to me, living a double life with such casual ease that it suggested years of practice. I screenshot the message and added it to a folder I was already creating on my phone, documenting evidence of David's deception. Some instinct told me I would need comprehensive proof of what had happened, not just for my own processing but potentially for Emma's protection as well. The question now was what to do with this devastating information. Confronting David directly would likely result in denial and manipulation, giving him opportunity to control the narrative or warn Emma before I could reach her. But approaching Emma first felt equally complicated, requiring me to destroy her world with information she might not be ready to hear. As I sat in my apartment surrounded by the evidence of David's betrayal, I realized that Marcus had been trying to protect me the night before. He'd recognized his brother-in-law at dinner and been horrified to discover that David was using a dating app while married to his sister. The cryptic warning had been his attempt to alert me without directly betraying family loyalty. The full scope of the deception was still sinking in. David had crafted an elaborate false identity, complete with fictional separation and carefully constructed backstory. He'd manipulated my emotions, exploited my vulnerability after Trevor's betrayal, and used my genuine feelings to facilitate his own infidelity. But perhaps most painfully, he'd turned my best friendship into a weapon against both Emma and me. Every moment I'd spent falling for him had been stolen from Emma, whether she knew it or not. Our relationship had been built on the foundation of betraying someone I loved. The tears came suddenly and overwhelmingly, representing not just heartbreak over losing David, but grief over the innocence of my friendship with Emma. Even if she was unaware of David's actions, our relationship would never be the same. The knowledge I now possessed would forever change how I interacted with her, regardless of how she chose to handle the information. As Sunday afternoon faded into evening, I made a decision that felt both necessary and terrifying. I was going to document everything I'd discovered, gather additional evidence of David's deception, and find a way to expose the truth that protected Emma while holding David accountable for his actions. The man I'd been falling in love with didn't exist, but the husband who was betraying my best friend was very real, and he was about to discover that his carefully constructed double life was about to collapse in ways he never anticipated. The week following my discovery felt like living in an alternate reality. Every morning I woke up hoping the previous day had been a nightmare, only to remember that David Rodriguez, my best friend's husband, had spent the last month manipulating me into falling in love with him. The evidence folder on my phone had grown to include screenshots of his dating profile, our text conversations, photos from our dates, and social media posts, proving his active marriage to Emma. I called in sick to work Monday and Tuesday, unable to concentrate on marketing campaigns while processing the magnitude of David's deception. Sophie stayed with me both nights, bringing takeout and tissues while I alternated between rage and heartbreak. The person I'd been falling for literally didn't exist, but the emotions I'd developed were devastatingly real. "You have to tell Emma," Sophie insisted repeatedly. "She deserves to know what kind of man she's married to." I knew Sophie was right, but the thought of destroying Emma's world with this information felt overwhelming. "How do you tell your best friend that her husband has been living a double life?" that he's capable of deception so elaborate it fooled you completely for weeks. By Wednesday, I'd made a decision about how to handle the situation. Emma's birthday party was planned for Saturday evening at their house in Cedar Park, a gathering of our entire friend group that David had undoubtedly forgotten I'd be attending when he created his dating app persona. The party would provide the perfect opportunity for maximum impact, ensuring David couldn't manipulate the narrative or control who knew what when. I spent the rest of the week carefully planning my approach. The screenshots needed to be organized for maximum clarity and impact. I created a digital folder containing irrefutable evidence: David's complete Connect Me profile, our messaging history, photos of us together, his lies about being separated, and proof of his ongoing marriage to Emma. The most damning evidence was a video I'd recorded of David during our last date, where he talked passionately about wanting to build a future with someone who shared his values and dreams. Watching him deliver those lies with such convincing sincerity while wearing his wedding ring made my stomach turn. Friday evening brought a text from Emma that nearly broke my resolve. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. David's been asking about you since he heard you were dating someone new. He's excited to meet your mystery man." The cruel irony of Emma's innocent excitement about her husband meeting my new boyfriend made the deception even more twisted. David had clearly been gathering information about my dating life through Emma, probably finding amusement in how close his secret was to being exposed. I spent Friday night creating multiple copies of the evidence folder, uploading everything to cloud storage and sending copies to Sophie's email as backup. If David tried to claim the screenshots were fabricated or deny the relationship entirely, I wanted comprehensive documentation that couldn't be disputed or destroyed. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect Austin weather that would have made any other birthday celebration magical. I chose my outfit carefully, wanting to look confident and put together when I confronted David and revealed his deception to our entire social circle. The black dress I selected was elegant but not overly dramatic, professional rather than vindictive. Emma had spent weeks planning her birthday party, transforming their backyard into a gorgeous celebration space with string lights, flowers, and a catered dinner for 30 guests. Under normal circumstances, I would have been thrilled to celebrate my best friend's milestone birthday surrounded by everyone we cared about. I arrived fashionably late, giving other guests time to settle in before the dramatic revelation I was planning. Emma greeted me at the front door with a huge hug, radiant with birthday happiness and excited to introduce me to people I hadn't met before. "Maya, you look absolutely stunning," she gushed, leading me through her beautifully decorated house toward the backyard. "David's been so curious about your new boyfriend. He keeps asking when we're going to get to meet him." The casual mention of David's interest in my dating life sent fresh waves of anger through me. He'd been playing both sides, gathering information about my relationship status through Emma while actively deceiving both of us. David was holding court near the bar when we reached the backyard, telling animated stories to a group of guests who were clearly entertained by his charm and humor. He looked exactly like the successful, devoted husband I'd known him to be for years, before discovering his capacity for elaborate deception. When he spotted me approaching with Emma, his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. For just a moment, I caught a flash of panic in his eyes before his practiced charm reasserted itself. "Maya," he called out with enthusiasm that sounded genuine to everyone else. "Emma tells me you've been dating someone new. We're all dying to hear about this mystery man." The audacity of his performance was breathtaking. David was actually soliciting information about his own secret relationship while surrounded by mutual friends and standing next to his wife. The level of compartmentalization required for such behavior suggested someone who'd been living double lives for years. "Actually," I replied, pulling out my phone with carefully controlled calm, "I think everyone here should meet him." I opened the evidence folder I'd prepared, selecting David's Connect Me profile as the opening exhibit. The shirtless photos, the fabricated bio claiming recent separation, the carefully crafted persona designed to attract women like me. "This is Dave," I announced loudly enough for nearby conversations to pause. 32 years old, works in real estate, recently separated and looking for something real. Emma's face registered confusion as she looked at the phone screen showing her husband's dating profile. Maya, what is this? Why do you have David's photo on some app? The innocent question broke my heart for her, but there was no gentle way to reveal what I'd discovered. I swiped to the next screenshot, showing the beginning of our message exchange. Because for the past month I've been dating your husband, I said simply. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Emma stared at my phone screen, reading David's romantic messages to another woman, her brain struggling to process information that contradicted everything she believed about her marriage. David's face had gone completely white, his practiced charm finally deserting him as he realized his carefully constructed double life was collapsing in real time. Maya, what the hell is this? He demanded, though his voice lacked conviction. This is your Connect Me profile, I replied evenly, continuing to swipe through screenshots while more guests gathered around us. These are the messages you sent me. These are photos from our date. And this, I said, reaching the final video, is you telling me how much you want to build a future with someone who appreciates authenticity. The video played on my phone's speaker, David's voice clearly audible as he delivered passionate declarations of love and commitment to another woman while his wife stood frozen beside him. The contrast between his words and the current situation was devastating. You took me hiking, I continued relentlessly. You brought me coffee at work. You introduced me to your friends, including Tom and Ashley, who apparently didn't realize I was your secret girlfriend rather than a legitimate date. Emma's shock was transforming into something harder and more dangerous as the full scope of David's betrayal became clear. Is this real? She whispered, though she was holding the evidence in her own hands. Every screenshot, every message, every photo, I confirmed. I documented everything because I couldn't believe someone could be this deliberately deceptive. By now, our entire corner of the party had gone silent, guests standing in shocked clusters as they witnessed the real-time destruction of what had appeared to be a solid marriage. Someone was recording with their phone, which meant this confrontation would be shared far beyond the people physically present. David, how could you do this? Emma's voice was barely controlled, years of trust and love crystallizing into betrayal and rage. How could you lie to both of us like this? David's response was exactly what I'd expected from someone whose manipulation had finally been exposed. Denial mixed with blame shifting and attempts to minimize the situation. Emma, this is all a misunderstanding, he began desperately. I never meant for any of this to happen. We've been having problems, and I was confused about what I wanted. Problems? Emma's voice rose with disbelief. What problems? We just celebrated our anniversary 6 months ago. We've been planning to try for kids next year. The mention of future children added another layer of betrayal to David's actions. He hadn't just been cheating on Emma. He'd been actively planning a future with her while simultaneously pursuing other relationships. And you, Emma turned toward me with pain and confusion. How could you not know he was married? How could you not recognize my husband? The accusation hit me like a physical blow, though I understood her need to direct anger somewhere. He told me his name was Dave and that he was recently separated. I explained. He created an entirely false identity. I had no idea he was your David until Marcus recognized him at dinner last weekend. Emma's face went through another transformation as she processed this additional information. Marcus knew, my brother knew and didn't tell me. He tried to warn me without betraying family loyalty, I said. He told me to be careful about trusting Dave's background, but I didn't understand what he meant until I researched David myself. The revelation that Marcus had been aware of the situation added another layer of family betrayal that Emma was struggling to process. Her brother had known her husband was cheating but hadn't found a way to tell her direct. David made one final attempt to control the narrative, reaching for Emma's hand in a gesture that had probably worked during previous arguments. Emma, please, let's talk about this privately. Don't let Maya destroy our marriage with her accusation. Emma jerked away from his touch like he'd burned her. My accusations? She repeated with growing fury. These are screenshots of you telling another woman you love her while wearing your wedding ring. The accuracy of her observation was confirmed by several guests who were examining the photos on my phone, passing it around like evidence in a trial. David's wedding ring was clearly visible in multiple pictures, making his claims of separation obviously false. "I want you out of my house," Emma said with deadly calm. "I want you to leave right now and not come back." "Emma, this is my house too," David protested, his desperation becoming more apparent as he realized the situation was beyond his control. "Not anymore," Emma replied firmly. "Get out, or I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing." The threat was serious enough that several male guests stepped closer to David, making it clear they would support Emma's decision if he chose to resist. David looked around the group, searching for allies or sympathetic faces, but found only judgment and disgust. "This isn't over," David said to both Emma and me, though his voice lacked conviction. "There are things you don't understand about this situation." "The only thing I understand," Emma replied, "is that my marriage was a lie and my husband is a predator who manipulates women for sport." David's final exit from his own home was witnessed by 30 guests who would spread this story throughout Austin's interconnected social circles within hours. His reputation in the real estate community, his standing among mutual friends, and his relationship with Emma's family were all destroyed in the span of 20 minutes. After David left, the party transformed from birthday celebration to support gathering for Emma. Close friends rallied around her while others quietly departed, unsure how to process what they'd witnessed. I found myself in the strange position of being both victim and catalyst, the person who'd exposed David's deception while simultaneously being part of the betrayal Emma was processing. "I need to know everything," Emma said when the crowd had thinned to just our closest friends. "Every lie he told you, every date you went on, every time he pretended to love you while coming home to me." I spent the next 2 hours walking Emma through the complete timeline of my relationship with David, sharing details that were painful for both of us but necessary for her to understand the full scope of his deception. The systematic nature of his lies, the emotional manipulation he'd used, and the elaborate false identity he'd maintained, painted a picture of someone capable of sustained psychological manipulation. "He told me he was recently separated and ready for something real," I explained, showing Emma the dating profile again. "He talked about his ex-wife wanting different things from life, made it sound like an amicable split between two people who'd grown apart." "We've never been separated," Emma said with numb shock. "We've never even discussed separation. He told me last month that he wanted to start trying for kids after my birthday." The contrast between David's stories to each of us revealed the depth of his deception. He'd been planning a future with Emma while actively pursuing other relationships, compartmentalizing his life with disturbing ease. As the evening progressed, more details emerged about David's pattern of behavior. Ashley called to apologize for not warning me at dinner, explaining that she'd recognized David, but couldn't believe he would actually be cheating on Emma so brazenly. Marcus arrived an hour later, having heard about the confrontation through the Austin social network. "I should have said something more direct," Marcus told Emma with obvious guilt. "I knew something was wrong when I saw him with Maya, but I didn't want to destroy your marriage based on assumptions." "My marriage was already destroyed," Emma replied sadly. "You would have just helped me discover it sooner." The most devastating revelation came when Emma accessed David's phone, which he'd left behind in his hasty departure. His Connect Me account showed ongoing conversations with multiple women, some dating back months before he'd matched with me. I wasn't his first extramarital affair. I was just the latest in what appeared to be a systematic pattern of infidelity. "Look at this," Emma said, scrolling through message after message with different women. "He's been doing this for at least a year, maybe longer. How did I not know?" The evidence on David's phone painted a picture of someone who'd perfected the art of living multiple lives simultaneously. He maintained different personas for different women, tailoring his approach based on what each person was seeking. With me, he'd emphasized authenticity and emotional connection because that's what my dating profile suggested I valued. By midnight, Emma had made several important decisions. She was filing for divorce immediately, changing all passwords and locks, and documenting everything for legal proceedings. The birthday party that was supposed to celebrate her entry into a new decade had instead marked the end of her marriage and the beginning of a completely different future. "I'm grateful you found out," Emma told me as the last guest departed. "I'm devastated, but I'm grateful. I could have spent years more living a lie." The friendship between Emma and me required careful rebuilding over the following week. She never blamed me for David's actions, understanding that I'd been manipulated just as thoroughly as she had, but our relationship was forever changed by the knowledge that my romantic feelings had been built on betraying someone I loved, even unknowingly. David's attempts to salvage his reputation proved futile. The story of his elaborate deception spread rapidly through social media and Austin's professional network. Screenshots of his dating profiles and our conversations went viral on Instagram and TikTok, making him a cautionary tale about online dating deception. His real estate career suffered immediately as clients questioned his integrity and trustworthiness. The viral nature of the story was both validating and overwhelming. Hundreds of women shared similar experiences in the comments, creating a digital support network for people who'd been deceived by partners living double lives. The attention also brought media interviews and speaking opportunities about recognizing manipulation in relationships. 6 months later, Emma and I were both rebuilding our lives with hard-won wisdom about trust, authenticity, and the importance of believing actions over words. Emma had moved into a downtown apartment and was thriving in her independence, while I'd taken a promotion at TechFlow and started dating again with much more sophisticated verification processes. David's divorce from Emma was finalized with terms heavily favoring her, thanks to the documented evidence of his infidelity and deception. He'd attempted to claim that his affairs were the result of marriage problems, but the systematic nature of his lies and the multiple relationships he'd maintained made those arguments unsuccessful. The experience taught both of us invaluable lessons about the difference between surface charm and genuine character, between manipulative performance and authentic connection. David had been skilled at telling people what they wanted to hear, but he'd been incapable of the vulnerability and consistency required for real intimacy. Marcus had been right to warn me about trusting appearances, though neither of us could have predicted the full scope of David's deception. The people who seemed too good to be true often were, and the most dangerous manipulators were those who understood exactly what their targets were seeking and could provide convincing imitations of those qualities. Emma's birthday party had been intended as a celebration of her life and achievements, but it became something more powerful, a moment of truth that freed both of us from relationships built on lies. The viral screenshots that initially felt humiliating ultimately became tools for helping other people recognize similar deception in their own lives. David Rodriguez had tried to live multiple lives simultaneously, believing he was smart enough to maintain elaborate deceptions indefinitely. His downfall came from the same arrogance that had enabled his manipulation, the assumption that he could control every variable and predict every outcome. Instead, his carefully constructed world collapsed in a single evening, witnessed by dozens of people and documented for thousands more. The man who'd built his relationships on lies discovered that truth, when it finally emerged, was more powerful than any fiction he could create. The screenshots went viral not just because they exposed one man's deception, but because they represented every person who'd been manipulated by someone claiming to love them while actively betraying them. Our story became their story, and together we created a community of survivors who refused to let manipulators operate in secret. The Monday morning after Emma's birthday party, I woke up to discover that my phone had been buzzing non-stop for hours. Overnight, the screenshots and videos from Saturday's confrontation had exploded across social media platforms in ways I never could have anticipated. What started as a private revelation among friends had transformed into a viral sensation that was being shared, commented on, and discussed by complete strangers across the internet. The original video someone had recorded of me confronting David with his dating profile had been posted to TikTok and already had over 2 million views. The comments section was flooded with thousands of responses from people sharing their own stories of dating deception, praising my courage for exposing David publicly, and expressing outrage at his elaborate manipulation. Dating app betrayal was trending nationwide, with people posting screenshots of similar discoveries and warnings about recognizing manipulation tactics. Instagram was equally overwhelming. Multiple accounts had reposted the screenshots of David's Connect Me profile, alongside photos from our dates, creating side-by-side comparisons that clearly showed his wedding ring while he claimed to be separated. The visual evidence was so damning that even people who didn't know us personally were sharing the posts with captions about the importance of verifying potential partners' relationship status. My phone rang constantly with calls from local news stations wanting interviews, podcasters requesting appearances, and even a producer from a national morning show who'd seen the viral content and wanted to discuss online dating safety. The attention was simultaneously validating and overwhelming, confirming that David's behavior was as outrageous as it had felt while also exposing my personal trauma to public scrutiny. Emma was experiencing similar media attention, though she was handling it with characteristic grace and strength. She'd posted a statement on her social media accounts, thanking people for their support while requesting privacy as she navigated the divorce process. Her post had been shared thousands of times, with comments offering legal advice, emotional support, and resources for people dealing with similar betrayals. The most unexpected development was hearing from other women who'd been involved with David. Within 48 hours of the story going viral, 3 different women had reached out to Emma through social media, each revealing relationships with David that had occurred during different periods of his marriage. The evidence they provided painted a picture of someone who'd been systematically deceiving multiple people for years, not just during the few months I'd known him. Sarah Michelle, a real estate agent from San Antonio, shared screenshots showing a 6-month relationship with David that had occurred 2 years earlier. He'd used the same separated husband story, complete with elaborate explanations about his ex-wife's different life goals. Sarah had only realized she'd been dating a married man when she found Emma's social media accounts and recognized David from family photos. Jennifer Park, a nurse who'd moved to Austin for work, revealed a 3-month relationship with David from the previous year. Her screenshots showed him using a slightly different version of his persona, claiming to be recently divorced rather than separated, but maintaining the same essential lies about his relationship status and availability for commitment. The most disturbing revelation came from Amanda Torres, a marketing coordinator who'd been involved with David just months before he started pursuing me. Amanda's relationship had ended abruptly when David claimed his ex-wife wanted to attempt reconciliation, asking Amanda to wait for him while he figured out his feelings. She'd later discovered through mutual friends that David had never been separated from his wife at all. The pattern that emerged from these multiple women was chilling in its consistency and calculation. David had perfected a system for maintaining extramarital relationships, rotating between different women and using variations of the same backstory depending on what each person seemed to want to hear. He'd studied online dating psychology enough to present whatever persona would be most appealing to his current target. More concerning was the evidence that David's deception extended beyond romantic relationships into his professional life. Several of his real estate clients came forward after the story went viral, revealing that David had misrepresented properties, inflated market values, and made promises he hadn't kept. His pattern of manipulation wasn't limited to dating. It was a fundamental approach to how he interacted with people across all areas of his life. The Texas Real Estate Commission launched an investigation into David's business practices based on the complaints that surfaced after his personal behavior became public. Multiple clients reported situations where David had provided false information about properties, failed to disclose relevant details, or made commitments he hadn't honored. His real estate license was suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. Tom Anderson, David's business partner, issued a public statement distancing their firm from David's actions and announcing that their partnership was being dissolved immediately. Tom revealed that he'd been unaware of David's personal behavior and would never have associated his business with someone capable of such systematic deception. The statement helped protect Tom's reputation while making clear that David's actions had professional consequences beyond just personal embarrassment. The viral attention brought unexpected opportunities alongside the overwhelming scrutiny. A literary agent contacted me about writing a book on recognizing manipulation in modern dating, while several organizations invited me to speak about online safety and verification strategies. The personal trauma I'd experienced was transforming into a platform for helping other people avoid similar deception. Emma was approached by a documentary filmmaker interested in exploring the psychology of people who maintain double lives and the impact on their victim. While she was still processing her own emotional recovery, Emma was intrigued by the possibility of turning our experience into educational content that could prevent other people from being victimized by skilled manipulators. The legal proceedings moved swiftly once Emma's attorney had access to the evidence that had emerged through the viral story. David's documented infidelity with multiple women provided grounds for a fault-based divorce that heavily favored Emma in asset division and spousal support. His attempts to claim that marital problems had driven him to seek relationships elsewhere were thoroughly contradicted by the evidence of systematic deception. David hired an expensive attorney and attempted to control the damage through carefully crafted public statements, claiming that his private life had been unfairly exposed and that the viral story had destroyed his reputation based on incomplete information. His efforts to cast himself as a victim of social media mob justice found little sympathy, particularly as more evidence of his professional misconduct continued to surface. The most pathetic aspect of David's damage control efforts was his attempt to claim that his relationships with other women had been emotional affairs rather than physical ones, as if that distinction somehow minimized the betrayal or made his deception less harmful. The screenshots and evidence clearly showed physical intimacy and serious emotional investment, making his denials seem even more dishonest than his original lie. 3 months after the viral explosion, I was invited to appear on a national morning show to discuss online dating safety and red flags for manipulation. The experience was surreal, sitting in a television studio discussing the most painful period of my life while millions of people watched over their morning coffee. The host was respectful and focused on the educational aspects of the story rather than sensationalizing the personal drama. The interview generated additional media opportunities and speaking engagements, creating an unexpected career path focused on relationship education and online safety. I developed presentations for college campuses, corporate wellness programs, and community organizations about recognizing manipulation tactics and verifying potential partners' backgrounds. The work felt meaningful, transforming personal trauma into tools for protecting other people. Emma found her own path forward through the attention the story had generated. She was hired as a consultant by a dating app company that wanted to improve their verification processes and safety features. Her first-hand experience with the consequences of inadequate background checking made her a valuable advocate for implementing stronger protections for users. The friendship between Emma and me required intentional rebuilding over the months following the viral incident. While she never blamed me for David's deception, our relationship had been fundamentally changed by the experience of unknowingly betraying each other through his manipulation. We attended therapy together to process the complex emotions around trust, betrayal, and rebuilding connection after shared trauma. 6 months after the confrontation, Emma and I traveled to Iceland together, fulfilling the travel dreams I'd shared with David, but experiencing them with someone who actually cared about my well-being rather than exploiting my vulnerability. The trip represented reclaiming dreams that had been tainted by manipulation and creating new memories based on authentic friendship rather than deceptive romance. The legal resolution of Emma's divorce was finalized 8 months after the birthday party confrontation. David was required to pay substantial spousal support and lost significant assets due to the documented infidelity. More importantly, for Emma's emotional recovery, the legal proceedings validated her experience and held David accountable for the systematic nature of his deception. David's attempts to rebuild his reputation and career proved largely unsuccessful. The viral nature of the story meant that potential employers, clients, and romantic partners could easily research his background and discover the documented evidence of his manipulative behavior. He eventually moved away from Austin, though his online presence made it difficult for him to completely escape the consequences of his actions. The most satisfying aspect of the story's resolution was hearing from people who'd avoided similar situations because they'd learned to recognize warning signs through our experience. Hundreds of messages from people who'd identified red flags in their own relationships, verified potential partners' backgrounds more thoroughly, or trusted their instincts about too good to be true scenarios made the public exposure feel worthwhile despite the personal cost. A year after the birthday party confrontation, I was in a healthy relationship with someone I'd met through mutual friends rather than online dating. Jake Thompson, my colleague from TechFlow, had introduced me to his college roommate Marcus Williams, a software developer who'd recently moved to Austin from Seattle. Our relationship developed slowly and transparently, with multiple verification points and integration into each other's social circles that made deception virtually impossible. Marcus was everything David had pretended to be: genuinely single, emotionally available, honest about his background and intentions, and capable of building trust through consistent actions rather than manipulative words. The contrast highlighted how David's polished performance had actually been less appealing than authentic connection with someone who didn't need to lie to be interesting. Emma was also rebuilding her romantic life with much more sophisticated verification processes and boundaries. She'd begun dating a teacher from her school district who'd been vetted through their shared professional community and whose background was completely transparent. The relationship was progressing carefully but positively, with Emma applying lessons learned from her marriage about the difference between charm and character. The viral story had evolved into a case study used in psychology courses, communication classes, and relationship education programs. Universities were incorporating our experience into curricula about online safety, manipulation tactics, and the psychology of deception. The academic interest in the story helped validate the severity of what we'd experienced while contributing to research that could protect future victims. 2 years after the confrontation, I published a book about recognizing manipulation in modern dating, with Emma contributing chapters about rebuilding trust after betrayal and the legal aspects of documenting infidelity. The book became a bestseller and led to speaking opportunities across the country, transforming our personal trauma into a resource for countless other people navigating similar challenges. The documentary about David's deception and its impact was released to critical acclaim and won awards at several film festivals. The filmmaker had interviewed David's multiple victims, psychology experts who analyzed his behavior patterns, and legal professionals who explained the challenges of prosecuting emotional manipulation. David had refused to participate in the documentary, which only strengthened the credibility of everyone else's accounts. The long-term impact of exposing David's systematic deception extended far beyond our personal situation. Dating apps implemented stronger verification processes, partly in response to the attention our story had generated. Social media platforms developed better tools for reporting and preventing manipulation. Legal frameworks for prosecuting dating fraud began evolving to address the kinds of systematic deception David had practiced. The most meaningful outcome was the community of survivors that formed around our story. Thousands of people who'd experienced similar manipulation found connection and validation through sharing their experiences in response to our viral moment. Support groups formed both online and in person, creating networks for people rebuilding their lives after discovering that their relationships had been built online. Emma and I became advocates for legislative changes that would make it easier to prosecute people who create elaborate false identities for romantic manipulation. While David's behavior had been legal despite being morally reprehensible, we worked with lawmakers to explore frameworks for addressing systematic relationship fraud that caused significant emotional and financial harm to victims. The personal healing process took years rather than months, involving individual therapy, group counseling, and intentional work to rebuild trust in our own judgment and in potential romantic partners. The trauma of discovering that someone we'd trusted completely was capable of such elaborate deception required processing not just the specific betrayal but the broader questions about how to trust anyone in future relationships. 3 years after the birthday party confrontation, Emma remarried in a small ceremony surrounded by friends who'd supported her through the divorce and recovery process. Her new husband was someone she'd known for years through mutual friends, whose character had been demonstrated through consistent actions rather than convincing words. The wedding was a celebration of authentic love rather than performed romance. I served as Emma's maid of honor, a role that symbolized how our friendship had not only survived David's attempt to destroy it, but had grown stronger through the shared experience of recognizing and recovering from manipulation. Our bond was now based on having seen each other at our most vulnerable and choosing to support rather than blame each other for the deception we'd both experienced. The speech I gave at Emma's wedding reception, focused on the difference between relationships built on truth and those built on performance, between people who enhanced your life and those who exploited your vulnerability. The lessons we'd learned through our painful experience with David had prepared us both to recognize and appreciate authentic connection when we found it. David's legacy became a cautionary tale rather than the successful manipulation he'd intended. His story was used in educational programs, legal seminars, and psychology research as an example of how sophisticated manipulation could be, and why verification processes were essential in modern dating. He'd achieved a kind of fame, but as a warning rather than an aspiration. The viral screenshots that had initially felt humiliating had transformed into powerful tools for education and prevention. They were used in presentations about online safety, featured in articles about dating fraud, and referenced in academic research about manipulation psychology. What David had intended as private deception became public education that protected countless other potential victims. Looking back on the experience, the most important lesson was learning to trust actions over words, consistency over charm, and transparency over polish. David had been skilled at saying what people wanted to hear, but he'd been incapable of the authentic vulnerability required for genuine intimacy. The difference between performance and authenticity became clear only in retrospect, but once recognized, it provided a framework for evaluating all future relationships. The birthday party confrontation that had felt like the end of the world at the time had actually been the beginning of a more authentic life for both Emma and me. Discovering David's deception had been devastating, but it had also freed us from relationships built on lies and taught us to value truth over comfort, character over charisma, and genuine connection over manipulative performance. The story that began with a dating app match and ended with viral screenshots had ultimately become a testament to the power of truth, the importance of friendship, and the possibility of rebuilding stronger lives after experiencing betrayal. David Rodriguez had tried to live multiple lives simultaneously, but his victims had chosen to live one authentic life each, and that choice had made all the difference. 5 years after that life-changing birthday party, I found myself standing in front of a packed auditorium at the University of Texas, delivering a keynote speech about digital deception and online safety to an audience of nearly 1,000 students. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was speaking at the same university where David had once perfected his manipulation skills, probably practicing on unsuspecting college students before moving on to more elaborate schemes. The speech had become my signature presentation, refined through hundreds of speaking engagements across the country. I opened with the same question every time: how many of you have verified the identity of everyone you've matched with on dating app? The sea of uncomfortable shifting and nervous laughter that always followed confirmed what I already knew. Most people were trusting profile pictures and carefully crafted bios without any independent verification, making them vulnerable to exactly the kind of systematic deception David had practiced. The students listened with rapt attention as I walked them through the red flags they should watch for: profiles with limited photos, reluctance to video chat before meeting, vague answers about work or living situation, and the classic move of claiming recent separation or divorce without providing verifiable detail. What had once been my personal nightmare had transformed into a comprehensive education program that had reached over 50,000 people through speaking engagements, workshops, and online content. After the presentation, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for sharing your story," she said, gripping my hand tightly. "I've been talking to someone online for 3 months, who's been giving me excuse after excuse about why we can't meet in person. After hearing your presentation, I realize I need to walk away before I get in too deep." These moments made every difficult speaking engagement worthwhile. The vulnerability required to repeatedly share the most painful experience of my life was offset by knowing that each presentation potentially saved someone from experiencing similar betrayal. The ripple effects of David's deception had ultimately protected far more people than he had ever harmed. The book Emma and I had co-authored, Digital Deception: A Survivor's Guide to Online Dating Safety, had sold over 200,000 copies and been translated into 12 languages. We'd received letters from readers around the world, sharing their own stories of manipulation and thanking us for providing the tools to recognize and escape similar situations. The international response confirmed that sophisticated dating deception was a global problem requiring global awareness and education. Emma had leveraged her experience into a successful consulting business, working with dating app companies to improve their safety features and verification process. Her recommendations had led to the implementation of photo verification systems, background check options, and enhanced reporting mechanisms that had made online dating significantly safer for millions of users. The pain David had caused had been transformed into protection for countless strangers. Our friendship had not only survived the trauma but had evolved into something deeper and more meaningful than before. We'd learned to trust each other with complete honesty, sharing fears and doubts without judgment, and supporting each other through the long process of rebuilding faith in romantic relationships. The shared experience of recognizing and recovering from manipulation had created an unbreakable bond based on genuine understanding rather than surface-level social connection. The legal precedent set by Emma's divorce case had influenced several subsequent rulings involving dating fraud and systematic relationship deception. While emotional manipulation remained difficult to prosecute, courts were beginning to recognize patterns of deliberate deception as grounds for enhanced financial penalties in divorce proceedings. David's case had become a reference point for attorneys handling similar situations. The most unexpected development in our story came 4 years after the confrontation, when David himself reached out through intermediaries, requesting a meeting. He claimed to have undergone extensive therapy and wanted to make amends for the harm he'd caused. Both Emma and I declined the meeting, recognizing that his desire to apologize was likely motivated more by his own need for closure than genuine concern for our well-being. Through mutual acquaintances, we learned that David had indeed spent time in therapy after his world collapsed, but the consensus among people who knew him was that he was learning new manipulation techniques, rather than developing genuine empathy. His therapist had eventually terminated their relationship after discovering that David was using sessions to practice victim narratives, rather than taking responsibility for his actions. The psychological evaluation Emma's attorney had requested during the divorce proceedings had revealed fascinating insights into David's mindset and method. Sarah Chen, the forensic psychologist who evaluated him, described David as someone with narcissistic personality traits, who viewed relationships as games to be won rather than connections to be nurtured. Her report had become required reading in several graduate psychology programs studying manipulation and deception. The documentary about our experience had won an Emmy and been used in criminal justice training programs to help law enforcement officers recognize sophisticated manipulation tactics. The film's success had led to a limited series development deal, though both Emma and I had insisted on maintaining creative control to ensure the story remained focused on education and prevention, rather than sensationalized entertainment. My personal life had found stability and joy with Marcus, who had proposed on the anniversary of the day we met, acknowledging how that timing represented the positive transformation that had emerged from traumatic experience. Our relationship was built on the kind of radical transparency that only seemed possible after experiencing the consequences of deception. We verified everything, communicated constantly, and never took trust for granted. Emma's marriage to her colleague Derek had produced 2 beautiful children who would grow up in a household where honesty was modeled rather than just preached. She often told me that becoming a mother had given her additional motivation to continue the educational work we'd started, knowing that her children would eventually navigate the same digital landscape where predators like David operated. The online community that had formed around our story had evolved into a formal nonprofit organization, dedicated to supporting survivors of relationship manipulation and fraud. The Authentic Connection Foundation provided counseling resources, legal assistance, and educational programming for people recovering from systematic deception. What had started as my personal trauma had grown into a movement that was changing how society understood and addressed romantic manipulation. The Foundation's most successful program was a peer support network that connected survivors of dating fraud with trained mentors who had navigated similar experience. The healing power of being understood by someone who had lived through comparable betrayal was immeasurable, providing validation and hope that professional counseling alone couldn't always deliver. The research component of our foundation's work had contributed to several academic studies on the psychology of deception and the long-term effects of relationship fraud on victims. Universities were beginning to recognize that systematic romantic manipulation caused trauma comparable to other forms of abuse, requiring specialized treatment approaches and support systems. The technology industry had embraced many of our recommendations for improving online dating safety. Photo verification, social media cross-referencing, and AI-powered detection of suspicious behavior patterns had become standard features on major dating platforms. While determined manipulators could still find ways to deceive people, the barriers to systematic fraud had been significantly raised. The 10-year anniversary of David's exposure approached with a mixture of reflection and anticipation. Emma and I had been invited to speak at an international conference on digital safety, sharing our story alongside cybersecurity experts, law enforcement officials, and other advocates for online protection. The evolution from victims to experts had been gradual but undeniable. The most profound realization, over the years, had been understanding that David's greatest failure wasn't his deception of us, but his inability to recognize the genuine connections he was destroying. His manipulative approach to relationships had prevented him from experiencing the authentic intimacy that made all the pain and vulnerability worthwhile. In choosing deception over truth, he had cheated himself more than anyone else. The viral screenshots that had once represented the most humiliating moment of my life had become powerful symbols of the importance of truth in relationships. They were featured in museum exhibits about digital culture, used in academic textbooks about online communication, and referenced in legal briefs about technology and privacy. David's attempt to live multiple lives had created a single unforgettable lesson about the unsustainability of systematic deception. Looking toward the future, Emma and I continued expanding our educational efforts, while building authentic lives with partners who valued honesty above convenience. The scars from David's betrayal had faded but never disappeared entirely, serving as permanent reminders to trust carefully and verify thoroughly. The wisdom gained through suffering had equipped us to recognize genuine love when it appeared and to protect ourselves from those who would exploit our capacity for trust. The story that began with a dating app match and ended with viral exposure had ultimately become a testament to the resilience of truth and the power of authentic connection. David Rodriguez had tried to manipulate multiple lives simultaneously, but his victims had chosen to live authentically, and that choice had transformed personal trauma into collective protection. The screenshots that went viral had done more than expose one man's deception. They had illuminated a path toward safer, more honest relationships for everyone brave enough to demand truth over performance. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.